Hundreds of thousands of dead bodies orbit Trantor, only becoming visible if they succumb to gravity and burn up on re-entry. Empire seeks answers for this calamity. Meanwhile, the Foundation calculates the cost of survival. Hello and welcome to Road Goes Ever On and On. Today we're discussing the second episode of the hit science fiction series Foundation, so spoilers ahead. And if you're looking for an escape from your own calamities, we provide that in the form of enjoyable weekly breakdowns. All you have to do is hit the like and subscribe buttons and click the bell icon for notifications. And with that, what did you think of the episode?
To be honest, I feel like for the crew on the transport shuttle, I feel that there was an episode missing in my eyes. Like I feel like they like showed a lot of relationships that, we see Gail's relationship with Raish, and I just feel like they didn't build it up to for me, So like the only thing that she really said was, "Oh, he's cute" in the last episode, and then it jumps into that they're already in a relationship kind of thing. And similarly, when she's talking to the one girl about the pregnancy, she it's some girl we've never met before, has no relation to us, and she demands this honesty from Gail that I feel like wasn't earned. And jumping to the end of how it all ended, I feel like it was not as powerful to me because there was all this relationship that was never built up.
I can see that. I mean, so I was kind of thinking that this is taking place over a decent chunk of time. Like we know that one of the stories is almost starting 35 years from now. So there's going to be a decent amount of hopping around in time, I assume. And so I think they maybe skipped some of the boring parts and jumped kind of right into the juicy bits and dump you right in the middle of relationships have already been built. I was actually okay with this technique. Traveling in space for like years to get to a destination would be very boring. To some extent, it's almost reminiscent of the awareness of how long it takes to travel in Game of Thrones. But Game of Thrones would actually take you through all of those boring moments versus this is let's jump to the juicy bits. We know that nothing's going to happen for a long time. Let's dive right into something exciting.
Which I think would have been fine, because it does feel like the story for the Empire picked right up from what had happened. It's him still blaming the two different planets for the attack. They're still talking about the attack. They're still talking about the space station floating. And then we're already with this Foundation. I feel like there's just missing a little bit. We're already with the Foundation. There's already all these key players in it. They're talking about the budget, but not really explaining how the Foundation was formed, or how they chose certain people to be go on this expedition. And I just feel like there was just missing, and maybe we'll go back and get a little bit more in-depth detail about it, or because I'm not quite sure how the storytelling is gonna go throughout the show. I could see they kind of come back and talk about those things, but I feel there was just a lot expected of the viewer right off the bat without giving too much explanation. I still think it was a good episode. I still like this show, but I think that it was just missing a little bit extra.
I can see that. And I think that, you said that one of the things we're missing is how these people were chosen, and that kind of brings up an interesting point in that Dr. Seldon isn't reliable. I think he tells the story that needs to be told rather than necessarily the one that is true in order to get what he needs. And so he did tell a story of, I chose everybody on this manifest. And We saw him get caught in one of his kind of stories, and it pointed out, and it really kind of makes me wonder what what levels he's willing to go to. So for instance, the attack that happened on Trantor was so timely. Is it at all possible that he has something to do with this? Because if if that hadn't have happened, I think they were going to be executed.
Yeah, and
Um,
he did say he gambled on trying to get the exile, so it does seem that he may have pushed those buttons, which would make him responsible for the death of basically countless people on those planets.
that could be wild speculation. So, however, what I don't well, another thing that I think is wild speculation, but I have actually more evidence for, is I think Dr. Seldon is the author of his own death.
So,
I think he put this plan into motion to have like I think that he told Raish to kill him.
and why do you
He,
think he told Raish to kill him?
I don't know why he necessarily told Raish to kill him, but here are some of the things I noticed. Okay, so in the orchard that they have on the ship, Harry's talking to Gale, and somebody goes by and says, "Hi, Harry," and he seems visibly disappointed, and he says, "I used to be Dr. Seldon. Now now people are calling me Harry." So I think he's becoming a very human figure rather than, I don't necessarily want to say like godlike, but something like infallible where people will hang their hat on whatever he said, like that is the truth. And he is, I think he possibly knows that he doesn't have the whole picture figured out, but he needs people to believe in him. So I think he wanted to be a martyr rather than a friend. He even said he didn't expect to be an occupant to Gale. So I
Right.
think he had anticipated that he would be executed and maybe Gale would be going.
So, do you think he's
Then
really dead?
I think he is. I think that I unless he fakes it, I do think that his martyrdom is important to him. So I don't think he would want that to be undone at some point. He also told Raish that they needed to sim a spacewalk, and Gale seemed kind of surprised by this. And this seemed to be around the time that Raish was getting irritated. I think when Raish was mad at dinner, I think it's because he'd already been asked at this point. And so he was unhappy with what was being asked of him to do. And meanwhile, Dr. Seldon's just like telling these dumb stories, which aren't even true, you know? And like continuing on, and I think he lashed out. And the last thing that makes me think that if not that Dr. Seldon was involved in this, that at the very, very least, that this was premeditated. Because when Raish and Gale were in that simulation, like watching the sunset or whatever it
Right.
was, as she was describing the life that they would have together, he was tearing up so much, and it didn't seem like joy and anticipation. It seemed like sorrow and regret.
He did say that I want it all with you. So it's like you're right. I did pick up that he was like crying, like visibly like crying, but not like outwardly crying, but he was just like crying. And so that does make sense that this is part of it. I don't think Seldon's death was part of his plan because he wants Gaal to go to Terminus to keep the Foundation going. He even had her sit in, the budget meeting for him. So if it was Seldon's plan to have Raish kill him, why would Raish jettison her off? I do think that Raish does have a tie to the Empire, though, in a way.
But like, what did Raish pull off of Dr. Seldon's ear?
I don't know, but also remember when in the last episode when Gaal was in prison, when they were questioning her and whatnot, Raish was able to see her in prison. And he came in and he said, leave it, leave it. And when the guards walked in, they seemed surprised to see him there and then just beat him up. So how would Raish have that access if he was Seldon's partner? We've already seen the Empire use spies before. I could see that Raish is a spy for the Empire as well.
Interesting. I did think it was so really interesting the kind of portrayals, in this. I know that I've said this before, like the person who plays Day is phenomenal. I think Dusk and Dawn are great as well. All the scenes around caring more about like showing strength and therefore like protecting the peace being more important than the truth, I thought were really interesting. It was like he was going to maintain peace no matter how many lives were lost.
Right.
Like it's definitely, as Dusk said, like the fear of the stick.
Right.
And it's an interesting portrayal because it seems like it almost seemed to me like Dusk was seeing in his age that maybe there's another way, but he's also not in charge anymore. Day is, and he knows who he was when he was Day. He knows the decision Day is going to make. It's still the show of power is still what's going to happen. It's what always has happened. It's Demerzel even kind of said that, like to Dawn, said you choose this every time.
Right. And she's been around for a long time. And so we saw that she has been with the Emperor and the Empire for years. We learned she's a robot. Very cool bit of like world building where
Yeah.
they mention briefly in the Orchard as well about the robot wars and how
Robot Wars.
the robot wars and how there were AI sympathizers and they would hang the AI sympathizers to keep the peace.
Yes.
Very great little thing that had a payoff where he hanged them at the end. And
No,
I thought
the emissaries. We'll call them the emissaries.
the emissaries. And he hanged them at the end to keep the peace, just like they would hang the AI sympathizers to keep the peace.
And Demerzel also said to Dawn that all the others of her kind were destroyed. Which makes me wonder, okay, so the peace is so important, right? Like this is something, it's been going on for, it seems like forever. The impression I almost get is it's been going on since Cleon the First. Demerzel was on the other side of what she's kind of seeing when she told Dawn that you always choose this. If her kind and the sympathizers of her kind were brutally killed and she watched as this happened, and then she's just been kept on as a plaything ever since. This seems to me like a plot point that we're going to come back to. So this is like, let's put a pin in this because I definitely think that it's going to come up again.
I could see two things happening with her specifically. Either She is designed to look like someone from the Empire's past, but since the Emperor wouldn't have known her, like she's just always been there. She's like a caretaker. She is like a mom to Dawn. She's a I wouldn't say she's a significant other to the today, and then maybe she's like a daughter to Dusk. I don't. I do think that she either is someone from the past of Cleon originally, or she will be pivotal in bringing down the Empire later. Those are my two predictions
Insane.
with her.
Okay. Yep. Yep. We're definitely we'll put a pin in it. I think we're definitely going to be coming back to those. And holy shit, the mass killing was rough. Especially with everything leading up to it, where both Day and Dusk made it clear that they knew that one or both of them probably were innocent.
Yes, that scene, the way
And
that
then like that level of brutality.
oh my gosh, that scene where Dusk is interrogating each one separately, and where it was just one speech from Dusk the whole time, like he was not interrupted one single time, but it kept switching to the Thespis or the I forget the other one's name, but it kept switching back and forth, and also the Hunter tribe, they were drinking red wine,
I did see that.
and then
Yes.
the Thespis were drinking white wine, and he drank the
He's
same wine.
he's planning on killing these people and he's serving at least two wines. Like he's
Yeah, and he even makes the
I
joke where he's like, "Oh, if I was trying to kill you with these, then I would use a lesser vintage than what I'm using
right,
now."
right. Yeah,
But that's when
that's
he
the Anacreons. Yeah, with the bows
the
and arrows.
Anacreons.
I did notice the two different colors of wine. I thought that was interesting. Like,
Yeah,
man,
he did.
you're gonna really do it to them, but for right now, you don't play around when it comes to wine service.
Yes. Yeah, you don't mess around with the vintage. At the end of that scene, he's just like, one or both of you might be innocent, and I believe you, and that's the messed up part, but gotta keep the peace.
Right.
Like, I will let you fall for the actions of somebody else, essentially.
Yeah. And then he even said, I think this might have been out of earshot. He actually made the comment that I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically like forgiveness would be okay for the Empire. It might even be good for it. It wasn't those exact words, but it was something along those lines where he was basically acknowledging the fact that not only would the Empire survive doing something not horrible, but it might actually be good for it. And I think that goes kind of back to what I said of like, it doesn't matter because he knows that in the end, it's Day making the decisions, and he knows who he was when he was Day, and so it's just going to continue.
Do you think that Dusk had like a change of heart because he started like having those tremors? Like,
I was just kind of, I don't, maybe.
because like we see that whole scene with the mural. I also do think the mural is going to come back. Like, there's going to be a whole thing about that mural. I feel like
Yeah.
it's a very
Yes,
important
because,
thing.
okay, so it's called the Mural of Souls.
Right.
And it's interesting because it didn't look like we know that there are people that upkeep it. So I don't think that's what he was doing. I think it is a living artwork that continues to be added to by each emperor, maybe when they become Dusk. Is that's one of the things that they take on is like adding to this mural. So it seemed like he was adding his own spin to it, not just like cleaning.
Yeah. Because it seemed like he was painting, where like the other guy was like
Yes.
cleaning he like scrubbing it, where and he was like actually like putting the chroma onto the mural.
Yeah.
So
Those
and
tools were pretty cool.
I liked that they had these interesting tools, like where he was like blowing, and like I don't know if you saw
Yeah.
as he's like blowing and it's coming out, he would like look inside of it and outside, and he
Yeah.
was like, so I did like the tools. Those were,
Yeah.
but he does also look younger than what Cleon looked like when he died. And I wonder if this is part of like the clone process where once they start getting to a certain age, he starts to kind of deteriorate sooner. And so now he knows that his time as Dusk is coming to an end. There will be a new dawn. Then, and I do think we got the confirmation because he said when I was day,
Yep.
I became, so I think it is a rotating.
Okay, what if in order to keep these Cleons coming so that there can't just be one like it is his lineage, so it is like him continuing on forever,
The
but in
same
order to
river.
prevent one like old doddering person from trying to control everything and keep it going for too long, what if in the clones is built like a timer? It has a shelf life, an expiration date, if you will. And so they can only live around X number of years, which makes it easy to plan out when the next, so that they're always around that kind of like,
Cycle. Yeah.
yeah,
That's what I'm thinking because I felt like Cleon looked a lot older, and it did seem like Dusk was
yeah.
dealing with his mortality in this episode, and that's like why he was so for the big stick before, but then he was like, maybe not using the big stick.
How, and that kind of goes back to that comment about like, you were saying it better than I was because I don't remember the exact quote, but like, how full of yourself do you have to be to say that you're not just the first, but that you're the river that all other rivers flow through? Like, if he has all of the rest of them are clones of him, but then he still actually makes them imperfect to be able to continue this clone cycle so that they aren't exactly him. And so
Right.
he's able to like continue his legacy that he's set up, and there can't ever be like a Cleon that eclipses him, that ends up like Cleon the 23rd becomes like Cleon the Great because he lives to 90 and does so much. Like, there's only so much that they can do before the next dawn takes over as a day when the previous dusk dies. Like, you have this window for your empire. I wonder if that's one of those like parts of it where he built that in as a way of saying like, I'm so great, all of them will be me, but also they won't quite be as good as me.
And I think maybe with this, like, since they do have a little bit of imperfections of being the regular Cleon, I feel like this is. I do still think that we're going to see Dawn break the cycle. I think just the way that they're setting him up, what he's seeing, how
Breaking
he's
Dawn
viewing this, breaking
is
Dawn.
now is now part of this.
Always has been. Always has been.
Another thing to kind of keep an eye on is, and now this is a pretty minor detail, but it's a detail in the show. There are in the ship there are different colored outfits. Like, there's a blue team that
Oh.
we see all in blue, and it makes me wonder if there are different roles which wear different outfits to make it easy to distinguish them at a glance. Like, you've got your advanced party wears something, your engineers who shouldn't be out and about and should just be making things, are wearing this. But I did think that there's the possibility that we'll be able to tell information about them based off of that. We'll see if that's true or not.
I'll have
Because at the same time, Raish was still wearing like the same thing we saw in like episode one. Like he's got that iconic looking jacket with like a couple different colors, and so it doesn't seem like he's wearing special attire. So we'll see.
It's because he's the spy. It's telling the
That
audience
might
he's
be
the spy.
it might be one of those things where it's like you want your lead actors to be like recognizable and stick out, especially when you have so many faces, you know.
Yeah.
Similar to, and then also like the whole Hollywood thing of like not covering, it's always interesting to me when you have in comic books you always have, so many of the people wearing masks, and in the movies they always look for an excuse to take it off because you can't cover up Tom Holland's face. You got to see him as Spider-Man. So just kind of
Yes.
interesting the choices that are made to kind of Hollywoodize things, to make people recognizable, to make sure that we can like digest things. And I did think that like the jacket was possibly one of those things where it's like, oh, I know him.
Yeah. That I could definitely see that. Kind of almost like the scars on Gail's face. We can always recognize her. That may, yeah, to make him more distinguishable from the other characters. Though I do feel like Raish has had such a big role that like I don't feel like I would forget Raish, or like those other characters that it seemed like they were trying to introduce in this episode. They're like the redhead girl and then the pregnant girl that like, oh, these are Gail's friends that
Right.
we don't, and then the other guy that shot the lava thing. I can't
Right.
remember his name, but I do think that they will
That's
get fleshed out.
that's always a tough thing with shows like this, is like knowing who to get invested to, because you don't know who's like a one-off character that you'll never see again, and then whose name you should be writing down because we'll definitely see from them, again. It's tough to tell. It wasn't until my second watch through that I saw that the person who saw Raish and Gale in the halls, when the alarm was going off saying that Dr. Seldon's life signs were going away, is the guy from
The
the a meeting that they
Yep.
recently had. Because like we only saw him for a second in that hallway scene, and so it wasn't a random person who caught them. It was somebody somewhat high up in the Foundation. So I don't think that's going to be easy to hide.
Yes. Yes, I do think that this is going to have ramifications through the rest of the series. I definitely agree. I do think that Gale has a superpower. And it's not just
Okay.
numbers. They talk
Okay.
when we see
Oh,
Dusk.
that she's like a seer.
Yeah, we see Dusk go talk to the priest and ask him about like Gale, like is she, part of, you know, trying to find out all the details about Gale. And he's like, is she a seer like you guys? Can she, talk to the gods and be shown what is going to happen? And he's like, no, she's has her prayer things removed, like she's not talking with the gods. But he does imply that she uses the math to see where she's going and can predict the future through numbers. However, we have seen her know things were going to happen without numbers involved, such as the explosion on Trantor on the bridge, and with Harry being killed. She was in swimming, just doing her own thing, and
Right.
she was like, something's happened. I have to go find out. So I think she is more connected to that seer religion than probably most seer people are.
Right. And it's interesting because it kind of builds out this world and makes you wonder, are powers a thing? Are there other powers? You know, this whole world is slowly being built out more and more. In that boring meeting, we found out that like just in the inner part, there's like 300 planets. That's not even the outskirts. Like who knows how many are there. Obviously, those are so much harder to get to that it's harder to document. Over 300 planets with over 100 different languages, over 40 trillion people in that inner part. So
And it's such a
it's
small percentage of the whole galaxy.
right. Which also makes this empire enormous that it controls so much, like that it's gotten that, like, bent that much of the universe to its own will, is like a whole galaxy that it's dominated, which is just wild.
It's because they got a big stick, and they're not afraid to use their big stick. But I
Right.
thought that that was also really, like, part of that world building of how they're describing, like, different planets in this different system. They used all different math. Like, the regular ones use divisible of tens, where, like, the other group that's, like, a little bit farther out uses 12 because you know, it apparently is divisible by more, or, it's more useful in some way. And then the other one, they were like, oh, 27, and it's by counting limbs. Like,
Right.
so it is crazy with all of these different, like, maths, and how there would probably be different cultures and different, how they can all be under the empire. Like, how,
Right.
and I think that's, we saw why. They have a big stick.
Right. I did think that was an interesting point about the different bases. Having done, programming, I've learned binary, and I've actually had to learn how to do binary math. So adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, binary numbers, and there are different tricks to do that, just like there are different tricks to do, in base 10, and there are advantages and disadvantages of each of these. It's base 10 was the first, I think, useful form in, our world, and that really allowed a lot of mathematics to come together, and so that just filled the world, and that just became the de facto. But if another one had been the one that was used, that would be what we use. Like, the way that we number things is, I don't want to say it's a mistake, but it could have easily been something else. It could have been 12 or 27, you know.
Right.
So it's interesting.
I will tell you one thing that the show made me think of quite a bit outside of the show. It's a little kind of off tangent, but they're talking about a lot of mathematics in the show, that mathematics can predict things. It's like this, almost like the Force a little bit in a way. And we're dealing with a lot of space travel, and it made me think of how impressive mathematics really is, where we, back in the early 60s,
Ah,
we sent people to the moon with just calculators, just math. Like, we didn't have
yeah.
computers. We were able to just basically, with math, predict how humans could go to the moon and how they could make it back in one piece. And I don't know if the show's trying to make me think of that, but I was thinking about it quite a bit in this episode, because when they were talking about the math.
And it is interesting that that is, like, Gail's love language. I mean, I'm making the joke about love language, but like that's her language, is math, which is, obviously used by the sciences, but is also its own thing. There are forms of mathematics that are extremely theoretical and have not yet found an application. But then there have been forms of mathematics that were discovered before there was an application, and then later on, a real world application was found for those. So there is a pursuit for, like, looking into pure mathematics. It's an interesting branch, and I do like that one of the characters has its heart in that.
I would almost say it's like a religion to her. She was talking about that's her new form of prayer, is when she counts the prime numbers. And I do think
Right.
the prime numbers are going to have a significant piece of this 1,000-piece puzzle, that where things connect. I think prime numbers are going to have a big part in it.
Interesting. Did you have any thoughts on the, I think it was the first world we saw in this episode, where all the people were getting gunned down so that Demerzel could get a confession from somebody? Because there was some interesting stuff going on in there, right?
Right. So it's I'm not sure exactly what was happening in the beginning, but it did seem as soon as they came in, they were erasing and deleting a whole bunch of stuff. Like they were doing things that are probably not sanctioned by the Empire.
Right. I mean, so there were a bunch of bubble boys. Obviously, not quite that ridiculous, but like there were these like large egg-shaped bubbles with people inside of them, and it seemed like their vitals were being monitored. And then yeah, she started erasing stuff when they came in, and Demerzel made the comment about this being an illicit biohacking organization, which kind of makes me wonder, like, biohacking, are they splicing genes in order to like create, certain genetic traits, or is this biohacking like where it's being, like implemented with like machinery and equipment or nanotechnology or something? Like I'm very curious about what they're doing, and I do feel like that is another thing that will be coming back.
Well, I think it's the latter, like the implants, like putting machines in them because of the bomb, where she was like, "Oh, I know you put the bomb in there."
Oh, that's right, because they did have like they just touched their
Right.
skin and we could see it light up, and they
And she says that you were the ones that put the nanobots in there. So that's why I don't think that they are editing their genes. I think it's more of a like probably putting implants, maybe titanium femurs, so you can
right.
run. I don't know, but I think it's more of a making cyborg kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's another thing where it's like we're getting tastes of this, and over time this world will be built out more. So I'm very excited about kind of learning all of those different parts.
Well, yeah, and even the pieces where like they shot her in the I think the trachea and she couldn't even breathe, and they have like a piece of technology that was like, okay, we're gonna let you breathe. Just the little things like that make this world feel like it's a real world, and that I do love that aspect of this show. Like I love I love the idea of the show, where it's going, and I know I was harping on it earlier, but it's just I just felt like I wanted a little more. Like I wasn't sad when Raish. I was more sad when Raish was in the sim with her than when he was like sending her off into space. And even, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like they do like a flashback scene of like their life together, and there were no moments from the first episode, so it just like showed them like just standing together, and I'm like,
Right.
that's I don't. But anyway, not to beat a dead horse.
I get it. That's fine. I think for me, kind of seeing that moment in the sim was clear show of his love but torn allegiance. Like he would like to spend the rest of his life with her, but it doesn't. Who knows why he's making that choice? I'm sticking with Dr. Seldon has put him up to this, because in the first episode, the narrator, who I assume is Gail, was listing off. She said a mathematician, a martyr, a murderer, but first something 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 Dr. Seldon, and it kind of sounded like these were like three different people, but I kind of think that these are three different things that Dr. Seldon is or will embody. He started off a mathematician. I think that it is important for him to martyr himself so that people, you know, almost kind of deify him and, don't pick his stuff apart because it's important that the Foundation lives on and isn't looked at as something that could be fallible like the man that built it. And then last but not least, I think he could be a mass murderer because I think he might have put this stuff into motion in order to make sure that the Foundation would get the resources it needed to be able to do this important work.
Yeah, I definitely think he will embody all of those, and that would make sense that this is his martyr moment. Do you think that
All the
this?
time.
Oh, could have
I
fooled
think all the
me.
time.
Could have fooled me. That there is there was a very not big part, but there was a part about babies, about like the pregnancy. Like I think what we were seeing was when Gail goes to the doctor, they pulled out her. I
They
think
collect the zygote, they freeze it,
so
and
that
then
they could put it back
they,
in.
yep,
And then we saw a girl that didn't want to get rid of her zygote, even
yep.
though there can be radiation and all this. Her breast milk can be poison. My question is, why was this in this episode? Right? Like it seems kind of like a of all the things that we don't know about the Foundation, how it got set up, we took a little bit of a chunk of time to talk about this pregnancy and how these pregnancies work on this planet. And I'm
I
wondering,
I kind of feel like it was interesting because it was showing that the Foundation isn't perfect either. It is making calculations about the cost of human lives and what is acceptable. So they're anticipating a great amount of death, and that is part of the plan.
which
That's
which is which they talk about, like, so that they like talk about that in a separate moment about talking about the life of how many people are going to die, how many people won't make it through like a year, how many people won't make it to a certain time, like.
but I think it makes it very human that like so that like that is very like cold, calculated, abstract, and this humanizes it and it puts a person who is self-aware that if she doesn't carry this through now,
She may
she
never.
likely won't survive to be able to have a baby. This literally is probably her only chance to carry a baby to term. And so it was more important for her to put her baby at that risk than to never have the chance. And so it kind of shows the impact of these cold calculations on the people that have to live with those consequences. The people that are like just being written off as numbers of like you're one of the 60% that's gonna die,
Right.
and
what
that's
if
acceptable.
what if I have a different theory?
Okay.
So I have a theory about this, of
Okay. I'm listening.
why there was such a big spot about this pregnancy part. I think that in the
They
sim,
forgot to purchase diapers.
I think they forgot to
They're
purchase a
not ready for
warranty on the ship that's traveling,
it.
and they've been getting those calls every so often to check the warranty
Yes.
on their spaceship. The
Check the
robocalls.
warranty. Yes.
It's just the Empire's voice that comes in and he says, "I'm checking about your warranty on your used spaceship."
I really hope that when we get to this point in the future where like powerful force has taken over an entire galaxy that they get rid of robocalls. Like But that
Hopefully.
goes down with like the robot wars. It's like that is what the robot wars is.
That's what started the whole war.
Anyway, now that I've thoroughly derailed you.
It's okay. My theory is when Raish and her were in the sim, she is now pregnant again, and I believe that Gaal will be the mother of Salvor Hardin. Hardin?
Yeah.
That's my theory. I don't know if it's right, but I think because she got shot off, she won't be able to have it retrieved from her. The next time that we see her wherever she lands, she's gonna have to deal with a pregnancy.
Interesting.
I could be making it all up. I don't know.
I like the idea.
I mean, to me, that was the only reason that I thought that they focus so much on the pregnancy and like how the pregnancies work there. I That's what my prediction is. I'm gonna stick to it.
I like it.
But with that, I think that brings our journey to an end today, folks. Thanks for joining along with us. Next week, we will see you guys back here with Foundation Season 1, Episode 3. I'm Mark. This is Sterling. Thanks.
Thanks.